believe in the gun. And our players don't use it most days. They use it every day.
In my 20 years as head coach, I've used the gun every single year. Well, my dream as a coach that everybody would grow up with the gun, because getting all those reps would make my job a lot easier.
Good afternoon, everybody. Tom McDonald from the NABC Championship Webinar Series. I'm on the board of directors for the NABC, the 2-year college coach rep. Some special thanks, Jim Haney, Reggie Mitten, Troy Hilton, who's been with you all day today. He's got some other things he's got to do. Eric Weberg, Rick Letty, all of the entire staff of the NABC has been unbelievably helpful. Advice, direction, we greatly appreciate them. The Gun for being a sponsor, making this all happen. Sideline Interactive is going to give away an 8 feet board for your sideline. Free shipping, it's worth $11,000 or more. Craig Reed from KBA, all those coaches that have spoken over the last, since the 13th, giving them clipboards, marker boards, magnetic boards. They've been nothing but stellar in their performance of getting stuff out and the craftsmanship. Mike Bray, Notre Dame, the past president of the NABC, ever since we started talking to him about doing clinics with the NABC, he's been like nothing but encouraging, would do anything to help. And then Jamie Dixon, who now is the president and he has the same philosophy. He called me after we got done doing his presentation and how much emails and social media things, posts and feedback that he got. And that's what everybody gets. So I appreciate everybody being on. The entire board of directors, they've been so helpful in social media, their time and effort in speaking. And like the clinics we had in the fall in Kansas City at the Hall of Fame, Las Vegas, and in Baltimore were some of the best clinics I've ever been at. And then we couldn't have done this without one guy in the background, was Ed Janka. I mean, he really started everything, and we've been with him at the Nike Championship Basketball Clinics for 20 years. Just what a great guy. And we'll talk about some other great guys here in a minute with Paul Biancardi. Championship Productions, Bill Bergen, Nate Landis, Daryl Bennett. So with that, I've got to introduce, and I'll just say this. I've said it a couple other times. When you talk about Paul, you talk about a coach. You don't have to say ESPN, even though he's with ESPN, a former coach at Wright State from 03 to 06, coach of the year in 04, named number one assistant, and you'll know why after we start talking here in 2002. He's been with ESPN since 08 for high school and college, all the recruiting. He's the guru. And what I really like about him is this. He shares, he talks. He spoke last year, our June Scholastic recruiting event in Iowa for all of our junior college coaches and the players. And he was off the charts for these kids and helping them and sharing what recruiting's all about. So I'm going to tap into that. And he's got a PowerPoint too. But I thought at the beginning, we just talk a little bit. I'm going to pick his brain for you guys. Coaches, if you could email in, question and answers, get them in, tweet in. But first of all, the warmest welcome to Paul Biancardi for getting on with us. And I would also say this, and sharing about all of our webinars. This has been an unbelievable thing. So with that, Paul Biancardi.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for doing this. This is a powerful time to learn, and I've learned so much by watching these webinars, and you serve up some fantastic questions, so I'm getting ready for I'm sure, some Rick Majerus questions. But to Lonnie, thank you, and to Troy, the NABC, thank you very much for having these webinars, because coaches at all levels are loving this. I mean, guys look forward to this all day long, and this is a wonderful experience.
First thing I'm going to talk about is this. There's a lot of coaches out there. You run into them all the time. They're going to be in need. Their programs are going to be in need. Two things. Become a member of the NABC. That's one. Two is if you get on these webinars, I mean, like today, I mean, you get bang, 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 Billy Donovan, Coach Jans, Holtman, you, but that's every day. I mean, it's every day these guys will give their time. If you got a couple extra bucks in your back pocket, go on, donate to the benevolency fund, because there's going to be a lot of coaches, a lot of families that are going to need help, and a lot of programs. So if you got a couple bucks, get on when you go in there and donate a couple dollars to the benevolency fund for the NABC. It goes right to help. It goes right to the people who need it. So with that, Coach, we've been getting a ton of questions during the other presenters about you and about recruiting. But my first question is this: knowing you, know how important education was, know how important your players were to you, and how you pushed them in the classroom and to be the best student, the best person, the best athlete, all those things. Who was back there for you in your journey? I mean, you look back here where you were at. I mean, you were at Boston College, Ohio State, St. Louis. You were with some not good coaches. I mean, talking about legends. So talk about your journey, talk about the influences, all that, and then where you're at and what you do.
Well, let me start as a player, because I wanted to play college ball so bad, but nobody recruited me. And now it's funny because I talk about recruiting all the time. Tom, I was a walk-on at Salem State College, and that's Division III in Massachusetts. And you know, when you're a walk-on, that means you invite yourself to the party, right? Nobody invited you to the party. You kind of walk in on your own. Well, I got cut my first year. So life doesn't get any worse than a Division III cut walk-on. I mean, it doesn't get any lower. But I was persistent enough to make the team and play for Tom Thibodeau, who valued what I brought to the game. And obviously it wasn't my talent that he valued, but it was all the traits and the intangibles that I could bring to practice, into games, into the locker room, and to the team, why he put me on the team. And then he named me captain in my senior year. So I tell all kids and all coaches, there's a home for everybody, but you just can't want it. You got to want it badly. And because a lot of kids get concerned whether or not they can play in college. I mean, 99.9% of the kids that I meet have way more talent than I did at the same stage. So there's a chance and an opportunity for everyone to play somewhere. Coaching started off at the bottom, JV coach, Division III assistant, and you mentioned mentors. Don't know if you know the name Jim Nelson. He was the longtime head coach and athletic director of Suffolk University. I spent 3 years with Coach Nelson, and he was my a very instrumental mentor at that time, because, you know, I was 25, 26, 27, a little bit of a wild cowboy back then. And he tamed me down a little bit and got me prepared for the next level, which was Division I. I went to work for Mike Jarvis, but I say the word work, but I was the volunteer. But he let me use the title of assistant coach, and it made me feel so good. And Mike's won everywhere he's coached. He's been the coach of the year several times. Took Boston University, George Washington, St. John's, all to the NCAA tournament. From the volunteer at BU, I go to Boston College. And as you can tell by my accent, I'm a Boston guy. So I became the graduate assistant at BC. I'm 28 years old. I owe about $20,000, and all I want to do is coach. Jim O'Brien was gracious enough to hire me as the GA, and I loved every minute of it. And the following year, there were some openings on our staff, and I got a chance to get elevated. And from there, my career took off. Assistant coach at BC, we had some good years. We went to the Elite Eight. We won the Big East Championship. Then went on to Ohio State, Final Four, some Big Ten championships. And Jim was the coach of the year at Boston College in the Big East when the Big East was in their heyday. And then he became the coach of the year in the Big Ten. So you talk about guys that you can learn the game from. He was fabulous. Then I had a chance to run my own program at Wright State, as you mentioned. And then after that, I went on to St. Louis University with the what I believe and you believe would have been a future Hall of Fame coach in Rick Majerus. So been in the Big East, Big Ten, Atlantic 10, the America East, Division III, JV, you name it, I've been there.
Well, that's why I said you're a coach. You know, you don't have to – you could coach an AAU team right now and ready to go. So take those three guys.
I'd like to. I'd probably get a head job that way.
You're right. Take those three guys, Mike Jarvis, O'Brien, and Majerus. Talk about their is there a common trait, common thread that makes them all successful? I mean, you look at Mike Jarvis at St. John's, the run he had there. I mean, the run you had at, is there one thing? And then what are the contrasts? How different are they?
Well, they're all different as people. I mean, off the court. I mean, Jim had a wife who passed away early, and he had 2 daughters, much like I have 2 daughters, and Mike had a son and a daughter. So they were more family type people, where Rick didn't have a family. Rick's life was on a napkin, as he would say, and that was a messy napkin, as you remember. But his life was his mother, Alice, and the game of basketball. But all 3 coaches were tremendous at schemes and strategy, teachers of the game. And there were guys that, as head coaches, they allowed me, even Mike Jarvis, when I was the volunteer. I mean, I had to do all the gopher work, but he allowed me to sit in on scouting reports, let me help run a drill in practice. He really prepared me as a coach, both with volunteer duties and real coaching type duties. I think they all gave me a lot of ownership, and that made me thrive in many ways.
We've had a lot of inquiries about you, the atmosphere, the culture of recruiting right now. I was wondering if we could talk about, just for a couple minutes, like what are some of the strategies you're seeing with universities, colleges right now to try to get in front of coaches? And then, a lot of people right now are saying, I want to get into college coaching. How do I recruit, or how do I recruit the Division III, the Division II, Division I? What kind of advice do you give to young coaches? And then my next question will be, you're talking about recruiting. Then what advice would you give just to coaches, what they need to be? So you got 2 questions.
Well, I'm going to put those 2 together, though, because I just had a conversation with a young man today, 25 years old, actually on Zoom, about coaching. And I think the first thing you have to do to be a really good coach is you have to be a great teacher. You talked about Jarvis, O'Brien, and Majerus. They were 3 outstanding teachers. And don't forget, those guys coach at the highest level. And they got their teams to do what they needed to do, because at that point in time in the 90s and 2000s, they could teach the game and they understood it from a schematic standpoint. So I would tell coaches, first thing is go places where you can teach and become a great teacher. It doesn't sound sexy, Tom, and it doesn't say, well, I'm going to get a job that way. You'll get a job if you're a good teacher, because guess what? When you got to step on the court and you got to run a drill and you got to give feedback and you've got to talk to your head coach, you better be able to show and explain why you're doing things. And you have to get the respect of your players. And I know we're going to talk about coaching today's player, but I'll tell you something about today's player. As soon as you start talking, the first thing that's going through their mind is, why am I listening to this coach? I may know more than him. And that's their mindset, and it's no fault of their own. That's the generation they were born in. So you better be a really good teacher of the game to be able to show kids that you can take them places where they really can't get to on their own. So coach at elite camps, go to Snow Valley. Jay Billis has a basketball camp that I run with him. Hoop Group has a camp. Big Shots, all these organizations. Go to a camp, have a team, run drills, and be able to teach the game. And that's really important. Anytime you can get recruiting experience, guys ask me all the time, how do you get to be a Division I coach? Well, I went through the volunteer, the grad assistant, and worked my way up. I never recruited, ever, except for Division III, until I'm in the Big East. And then I went from being with Minnows at Division III to the Sharks of the Big East. I mean, I was in a conference where guys were recruiting way over my head, and I had to learn on the job. So any recruiting experience you can get, though, the Division III experience really helped me a lot. Any head coaching experience you can get, high school head coach, middle school head coach. Being a head coach is so important to your development as a coach. So I would say try to get any head coaching job that you can. Don't worry about the level. Concentrate on the experience and the job. And you'll merge the recruiting with the teaching, and somebody will know that you're really good. And the last part is relationships. You have to get to know people, and people have to get to know you. And I think that's so important, because once you establish a relationship, I think it's important to maintain it, right? We met, we established our relationship, we maintain it, and we sustain it. And too many times, guys meet somebody, then you never hear from that person again.
Until they need something.
Until they need. I'm going to give you a 30-second story. I get the job at ESPN, and I'm involved with all these players, right, on a first-name basis, families, coaches. I have direct access to all of them. A big-time coach gets a job at a big-time school as an assistant coach. Well, it's the night before Easter, and this coach calls me multiple times. As I went to bed, I looked at my phone, and I saw 4 phone calls from this coach, who I never spoke to a day in my life on the phone, ever. Called me the next day at Easter. Of course, I'm with my family. I didn't return the call for a couple of days later. And the first thing I said to him, I said, Coach, we know each other, but we've never spoke before. You can't just throw 12 messages at me because you got a new job. And that's what assistant coaches and recruiters do. They just throw themselves at you because they need something. They never think about what it's like on the other end to get all that heat, all those phone calls. So establish your relationships, maintain them, and sustain them. And that's how you be a great recruiter.
We had a guy, one coach on the message board said about, it used to be all about camps. That's how you get to know everybody. The Garfinkel, every camp, every coach had a camp, but that's really doesn't happen much anymore.
No, the camps are gone. The Final Four now is the social place to be. And obviously this year it was canceled, but you want to go to social gatherings, of course, when we're allowed out to go, and you want to meet people, but it's about developing genuine relationships. I'm at ESPN now. You're at Championship Productions. We've been here for a while. We don't know where we're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, but I do know about our relationship and how it works. And that's what's most important. It doesn't matter who you meet. It's how you treat that person when you meet them.
I agree. I'm going to turn this over to you for a couple minutes. I'll be monitoring. There's already about 20 questions. So let's, while you're firing that up, let me ask you 2 questions and then we can get going, okay?
Jairus questions?
No, it seems like coaches just want players. This is the questions from people listening. Want players, not good coaches that can do all the things like recruit, scout, and teach. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a lot of coaches know the game, and they know they can teach it. They know they can strategize. And they know how to run a program. What's the most important thing for every program? Division III, 2, and 1 is the talent that they have. Yes, getting players is important, but it's not just getting players. It's about getting the right talent. A lot of programs get bad talent, and then they have bad teams, and they have bad seasons.
What's the difference between recruiting and evaluating?
Oh, it's huge. Look, the only way you're going to be a good recruiter is to be a great evaluator. And that's why we see transfers, and that's one of the big reasons we see teams that don't live up to their expectations, because whoever they recruited, they never took the time to evaluate. Some of the best programs have the assistant coaches that are so thorough with the talent evaluation, the trait evaluation. When I worked for Coach Majerus, and I was a head coach before that and a longtime assistant in big leagues, he said, you make sure that you watch 2 game tapes on whoever you're going to bring to me. And I don't care how many times you've seen them live, you better watch 2 game tapes. So that makes you scramble and, get the game tape back then. But you have to be a great evaluator to be a good recruiter. Anybody can pick out talent. We all can walk in a gym and see who's good. We have to get under the surface to see who the right talent is for our program.
Last one before I turn it over to you. Do you recommend a college student to major in education if they want to be in coaching?
Yeah, I think it's a great major. I was an education major, physical education and health back then, but it taught me how to develop a lesson plan. It taught me how to be a teacher. And again, you can talk about players all you want. I know a lot of assistant coaches that are bouncing in and out of the profession because they get players and then they move on to the next job. They can't hold down jobs because they can't teach the game. You got to teach the game. You got to study the game. You got to know the game.
It's interesting from a person now that watches and do all these educational videos, you can really see the guys, the men and women in this profession that have come through the teacher, high school coach, junior high coach, up into this. They're just different. They teach differently. Lesson plans.
Yeah, it is. And it's very important to do that. You have to learn how to teach. But yes, you have to know how to recruit. You have to understand how to evaluate. You have to understand how to build and maintain relationships. You have to know people that are around the recruit. I like to call it the 360. You have to know the player and all the people around the player. and you have to be very persistent as a recruiter, because you know, and I know that you're going to be told no a lot more than yes. But just getting players, those coaches don't last long in the profession.
Coach, it's yours. I'll turn it back. Let me get some questions when you get done, okay?
Okay, I have my here is going to
assistant coach.
Anybody want to hire Katerina Biancardi? She's up for employment right now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, were you ever a restricted earnings coach?
No, I went from a graduate assistant
See?
to a full-time coach. I went from Division III to volunteer to graduate assistant. I skipped that level, went full-time.
You missed out right there, man. You missed out on that one.
Missed out on the money. Okay.
Have a great time. I'll be back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. For those that know me, know that I love coaching, and I always think about what it would be like if I coached again. And being at ESPN for the last 12 years, I've said, you know, if I coached again, I would do this differently. I'd look at running this offense or these offensive schemes. Or maybe I'd try this defense out. I really like this defense that I had a chance to watch. And then I talked about to myself, recruiting. Boy, I'd recruit this type of player if I was a head coach again. So I thought about all these different things. And for the last, 4 or 5 years, it's really dawned on me that it isn't so much the offense, the defense, the drills that I like, that I picked up along the way, even what I valued in recruiting. I would be remiss if I didn't say I would have to learn how to coach today's player better. And as simple and as solid as that sounds, that's what I would put my focus into if I became an assistant coach or a head coach right now again. And that's why I picked this topic to talk about, because I think all your success on the court is going to determine your relationship that you have off the court.
Coach, do you have a PowerPoint you're going to show?
As soon as my assistant gets it up, yes.
All she has to do is share the screen.
Yeah, we're working on that right now.
All right, that's it. Lonnie, if you need to help, just let us know what we need to do.
There we go. Now
As Coach Majerus would say, Tom, right? You're fired.
No,
then,
he'd say,
hey, he'd fire you and then he'd invite you out to dinner that night.
he'd say, let's go to Culver's, get ice cream.
that sure he would. Go to Coach Majerus right now.
There you go.
Take things off right there. So if you want to go ahead.
All right, so I got it outlined into 3 parts, which Katerina did a magnificent job. But what I've learned, next thing is the snooze button, the power of the 3 C's. Part 2, what today's player is consumed with, what's changed, what hasn't changed, some difference makers, a checklist, and who I think you should follow on social media, of course, beside myself, to get some great insight on today's player. Okay, can you get rid of those? All right, what I've learned, how you deliver your message must change. That's the most important thing that I want to talk about today, is how you communicate and deliver your message. That has to change. What doesn't change is every coach and every program that I talk to, and I know, Tom, you do, and all the coaches that are listening, you have core values, you have your principles, you have your rules, you have your policies. That's not going to change. And everybody's going to run their program to what they think is best for them in terms of standards, principles, and values. One thing you have to understand is today's player, they are so consumed with the future. And it's called Generation Z. These are kids that have been born from after the year 2000. And what I've learned is they really crave to have good relationships.
There you go. Now you got the snooze button.
All right, snooze button. So think about this. What's your end game in coaching, right? You think about winning, successful seasons, building a program, improvement, development, all the things that go along into winning. At the end of the year, you want to have a successful season, hopefully make the postseason. So that's your big picture end game. But to achieve that end game, you got to be in constant communication with your players. And it used to be, so much during the season, not so much in the off season. Nowadays, it's daily, it's weekly, it's monthly, and it's year round. The snooze button is when they keep hitting that button, no matter what you say, they hear you, but they're not listening. So the good news is the problem, it's not you, but it could be the way you deliver that message. And that's really important for all the coaches to understand, that you can help yourself really easy on this, is by learning how to change your message and learning how to build relationships with your players. Because all the success that you're going to have on the court is going to come from the time that you spend with your players off the court. I like to call the first one the power of care. You have to care before you coach. You have to talk to the person before you talk to the player. The kids today, they recognize that, they understand that quicker than ever before. So when you're recruiting and you're just talking about their game, and you're just talking about the game of basketball, which some recruiters do, you skip the person part of it. You skip the caring part. You don't build a relationship. And players today recognize that, whether you're recruiting them or they're in your program. And if you're going to care about your players that you're coaching, I think there's 3 areas that you have to consider. And I like to call it the acronym CAT. Their character, who they are as a person, their family life, their friends, everything about them as a person. Care about their academics, what they want to study, what they would like to be someday when basketball is over with. What are their best subjects? What do they struggle in? Everything and anything you can know about them academically and maybe help them academically is important. And then obviously the basketball. They want to have a plan. They want you to have a plan for them. They have goals. They want your plan for their goals. And so when you're talking to your players today, make sure it's about their character. Make sure it's about the person first, then about their schoolwork, then about their basketball. And it should be a healthy mix, a blend of all 3. The more that you emphasize the CAT, I like to say, that allows you to coach them with more intensity, a little bit harder. Because when you're talking to them and meeting with them about personal issues and about their character, how to make good decisions even, talking about their academics with them and their grade point average and their study habits, you're trying to improve them as people. You're trying to improve them as students for their future. You're trying to educate them. And obviously, you're trying to improve their game. And that builds trust. And once you have that trust, then you get close. And once you get trust with somebody, that leads to believing. And they start to believe in you as their coach. You can't skip steps anymore. You can't just coach them. Okay, you have to get to know your players as people first, and you have to take the time to do that. The believe in gets the buy-in. We hear about buy-in all the time. Teams are buying in, they're not buying in. A player's buying into your program and your system, or they're not buying in. I really and truly believe, from evaluating, interviewing, and spending so much time with today's player over the last 12 years now, that when you start to focus in on them as a person, their grades, and their basketball ability, and then you build great trust. And I think that trust, as I mentioned, leads to buy-in. The more time you can invest with your players off the court, okay, out of your office, on campus, in their backyard, in their dorm, in their hometown, at a restaurant, the more time off the court, it helps you more on the court. And your message will get received at a better rate. Next one, power of connection. When you look at that picture, you see the circle, the blue. That is a sophomore player. And yes, that's an iPhone in his hand. We're having a great conversation at one of my camps, and we were talking about his game, but that phone is connected to their hands all the time now. So you have to learn how to connect with your players through that phone or the iPad or the laptop. And the Generation Z, they love to text. They love FaceTime. They love social media. So you have to get on their level. And myself, I love to talk to people, and I love to be in person with people. That's not the case as much anymore with today's kid. A text message and some FaceTime is just as valuable, and connecting with them or commenting on their social media or having a conversation with them, or just let them know that you know about their social media accounts is so important to them. It really helps build a connection. And then the next thing to connect with your player, I think it's really important that you understand their lingo, right? We as coaches talk about our terminology all the time, our basketball terminology. And it changes from high school to college, as we know, and then from college to the pros. Well, this generation has a lingo, and you have to know it. And for example, FOMO, the fear of missing out, when they type little words or little acronyms, you have to know what it means. And when you show them that you know what it means, they feel good about the relationship that you have with them. And another one is FOLO, the fear of living offline. A lot of kids in Generation Z get very nervous with the fact that if they're not online, without a certain amount of time in their life. I know as a parent at times when my kids were younger, if I took away their phone, they had FOLO, right? They were fear of missing, fear of living offline. So that phone and that picture is instrumental because they're always looking at it. And you need to know that they're always looking at it. It's a visual world for them. Use emojis, use GIFs, use memes, okay? They respond to that. They react to that. They understand it. So get educated in that. And go where they are. Go on the platforms. As I mentioned, a lot of coaches I know, they have Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts just to follow their players. Some are active and engaging on social media. Some are just using it to monitor. TikTok, if you don't know what it is, look it up and understand it because all your kids are on TikTok. And Snapchat, Spotify. Those are the areas where your kids are at as much as possible. So make sure that you are on that level and that you're connected with those social media platforms. Understand how they work. Try to communicate with your players on those platforms. I think it will help your relationship tremendously. That was pretty creative right there. Those are GIFs, right? Those are memes. I love the one of Larry Bird. Check out Roy Williams. I mean, you can be so creative. You can get visual messages and send them to your kids. You can personalize it. Motivational, inspirational, spiritual, stuff about your program, stuff about going on in the world. You can send anything you want to your kids that's positive and helps you connect with them without any words. All right, the more power of connection, okay, getting on their level, spending time. That's the key. How much time are you going to invest in all your players? Because the more time that you spend with your players, this is crucial, the less time someone else is spending with them. Look, everybody's trying to get into your players' space from the neck up. A lot of people are trying to do that. So you have to carve out your space inside their head. And you can do that by being on those social media platforms, connecting with them. You can do it by texting. You can do it by FaceTime, obviously in-person time and phone conversation. But every time you're with them, you're trying to send, positive messages. You're trying to plant seeds. You want your voice in their head, your message on their mind. And we said building a relationship off the court, it really helps on the court. I mean, you talk about teams. I watch teams all the time. They go on losing streaks, so they have losing seasons, and the media talks about, coach lost this team. Well, it's not because the coach doesn't understand strategy or scouting or preparation, and sometimes it's not even a talent issue, but it could be a connection issue. It could be a relationship issue. It could be a communication issue. And if you're strong in communication and connecting and caring, the 3 C's, you won't lose your team. You may lose some games, but you won't lose your team. I like to say you got to over communicate. And as coaches, I'm guilty. We all like to talk. As parents, we like to lecture. Isn't that right?
Too much.
Too much. Listen. The power of listening is so vital to build a relationship with your players. Listen to what they say. Store it in your space. Okay? And you have to know and communicate with your players. I like to call them 360. Everybody around your player, as a head coach and as an assistant coach, get to know the 360. vital coaching your kids. His friends or her friends, their boyfriends, girlfriends, okay? Parents, uncles, trainers, strength and conditioning coach, AAU coach, and at all levels. I'm not talking just college coaches. You're a high school coach, you better know all the people around your players. And it even starts in middle school. The NBA, they deal with this on a 24/7 basis. So know the 360 around your player. That's vital to stay connected and communicate with your player. All right, the power of communication. I'm learning how to be a better communicator, and I'm learning all the time, and being around today's generation has helped me tremendously. You know, the days of doing it because I told you so, those days are gone. And you take the best coaches in college basketball, we can name them all: Tony Bennett, John Calipari, Bill Self, Roy Williams, Coach K, Tom Izzo, you can go on and on, Leonard Hamilton. They understand that they have to communicate with their players. It's not just what they say, but how they say it. Those guys have changed over the course of time, and that's what I admire so much about those coaches. Because the guy who says do it my way or the highway, well, guess what? The coach is going to end up on the highway if he doesn't deliver the message the right way. Be mindful of what you say, how you say it, and when you say it. And there's a great example of Coach Majerus. During the games, he was masterful at saying the right thing at the right time and knowing how to say it. In practice and in the locker room, it was a much different story. He was a combustible man, a brilliant man, but at times, for him, it didn't matter what he said. He was going to say it his way. And I'm not sure that would work today, even for a giant in the game like him. And he had to have assistant coaches like myself, Porter Mosier, Chris Harriman, Sean Harrington, help, deliver the message in a different tone. And so that's what good assistant coaches do. But understand that that's vital. And when you're coaching someone really hard, you have to know the guys that really can thrive off of that or the guys that go into a shell. Are you going to hold one of your players accountable in front of the whole team? Some of those players like it, and they just move on. Others, you got to pull them to the side and hold them accountable. So it's very different today, and you have to know your player's personality. Even though you're coaching the team and you're still holding them to standards and you're holding them accountable for their actions, the communication is vital and how you do it. All right, some quick do's and don'ts. This is huge, and I've been guilty of this in the past. I still watch coaches do this today. Not as much, but still too many. Okay? You want to talk to and with your players as much as possible. You want to get on their level. I watch too many coaches talk down to a player and they talk at the player. Major turnoff for today's player. You want to create, time and space for your conversation. You want to be demanding. You want to push players, okay? You want to get them to places they can't get to on their own, but you don't want to be demeaning. You want to have the hard talks. Try to have the hard talks in private. Don't bring public issues, okay, on private issues in public places, like in practice or the locker room. Do it one-on-one. Practice shouting praise and then whisper that criticism. And always plant seeds and send messages of positivity. Don't embarrass your player unless you know he can really handle it, okay? Got to be careful with your favoritism with your words. You want to make everyone feel valued and respected. So make sure that you're not giving all your compliments and all your praise just to one or two players. Don't be inconsistent with your message. It's really important as a head coach and assistant. You guys have all the same terminology and the message is the same. Now, in your meetings as coaches, and I've been there 1,000 times, you disagree, you debate, but once you decide on something, you walk out of that office and you align together as a staff and you make sure your message is clear and it's communicated that way. Today's player, really consumed with the future. It's a result-centered society. It's no fault of their own, guys and girls. They were born into this generation. They knew how to swipe an iPad or an iPhone before they could even speak. It's a non-process generation where everything is quick. We know there's a lot of entitlement, and they want results, and they don't care how it gets there, and they expect results to happen. It's just like a lot of college kids graduate today, and they expect to automatically be in the working world. And when you talk about internships and graduate assistants, some almost turn their head at that. Players, the attention right now is on instant results, okay? So if I coached again, I would really, really pay attention to the process. We talk about it as coaches. You coach that way, but I can't tell you how important it is to coach your players through the process, which we like to call the journey. I would take the time. I would put these 6 points all over my office, in the locker room. And signs and sayings are not culture. I understand that, but it helps plant seeds. I mean, culture is the habits of your players and how your players act on a daily basis. But I would explain the process to my players all the time, both as a team and on an individual basis. I would break down the why of the process and explain it. Embrace it. Don't be afraid of it. Understand that the process takes time. So you want to embrace everything that the process brings to you. Emphasize the process. I get asked all the time what made Coach Majerus such a great coach and a teacher. There were a lot of things, but he emphasized almost everything. So what you want to do is emphasize the process as much as you can on a daily, weekly basis, in the locker room, on the court, in the film. And anytime you can emphasize something that is process-driven, you hammer home that point to your players. Really big. Praise the process. Okay? You see somebody doing some extra work, praise them for that extra work. How many times do you lecture sacrifice, hard work, commitment? Well, that is all part of the process. So when you see it or you hear about it, praise it. Maybe a guy's not getting the playing time that he wants, and he's being patient and he's working hard. Praise him in front of the team about how he's being patient. Patience is part of the process. Somebody hustles on the floor for a loose ball, okay, and somebody gets a layup or a jump shot. We look at the result. Let's look at how that happened. It happened by that player's hustle on the floor. You see somebody putting some extra time in a study hall. Praise them. Praise them for any process-driven things. I'm not talking about flattery. I'm talking about real praise when it happens. Trust the process. We say that as coaches 1,000 times, but you have to be a leader of your words to make sure that you understand that if you trust this, it'll get you to where you want to be eventually. And it takes time. Teams, they blossom in stages and seasons. It may not happen as fast as you want, but make sure that you are trusting the process as a coach and a coaching staff and support staff as the example for your team. And then you want to explain the benefits of the process as a team, as a program, and then individually, how following the process can benefit each player. So I think if you follow those points about process, I think it will really help you progress as a team. I think it'll give you a chance to strive for excellence. Today's player, as I said, is consumed with the future. They're also consumed with perfection. Nobody's perfect. No team is perfect. Okay, though Montverde in high school this year did go undefeated. We do have some undefeated teams. But as coaches, we understand we're not going to have perfection, but we can strive for excellence. The more you can engage and embrace and emphasize, praise, trust, and explain the benefits of the process, I truly believe you'll have a better team. All right, so what's changed? Society has changed. Our culture has changed. We're going through a pandemic right now of major change. So you have to be aware and understand what's different in today's player. So number one, how you communicate your message is now everything. Okay, you can have the greatest message in the world. If it doesn't resonate, you're not going to have that player's attention. You're not going to have that player's head. You're not going to have their heart. And the relationship's not going to be what it could be. And so the results on the court, in the classroom, won't be the same. Okay? Who and what surrounds your player has changed. Middle school kids have people around them, okay, that are telling them about their game. High school players, I don't care if they're just good high school players or ESPN top 100 players. There's somebody around every player telling him what he or she should or shouldn't be doing, okay? Some are allowed in their circle and some are outside the circle. So know who and what surrounds your player and try to shrink that circle as much as you can. How the players interpret and comprehend your message is different. They hear criticism sometimes as a point of you don't like them. They take it personally. So what you want to try to do is be more instructional than critical when you're upset with your players. I couldn't do that 15 years ago. I would do it today as much as possible. When you're heated and you're upset, see if you can be more instructional than critical. When I think back why I yelled at players, okay, yes, they made mistakes, but was that really going to make them a better player? I yelled because it made me feel better. Okay, so the more instructional you can be, even if you're yelling, it's better than being critical, I believe. Technology is everywhere, so make sure that you understand it and how it influences your players. As coaches, you got to set the thought process, the habit button on a daily basis. Middle school coaches have to do it, then high school coaches have to reset buttons, reset habits, college coaches, and the NBA as well. It's happening at all levels, not just at the level you're at. You have to care and understand before you're a coach, and that's really that's the premise of this webinar. The relationship before the results. Okay, I got that from Tim Elmore. You should look him up on Twitter. He's fabulous with Gen Z. Shout out to Tim Elmore. Alan Stein has said this 100 times. He's a good friend of mine. You have to care before you coach. And I'm saying to you, talk to the person before you talk to the player. You have to battle the we versus me mindset all the time. And you can't let selfishness creep in to your team. And that, again, all goes back to the relationship that you have with your players. And I said all levels are experiencing exactly what you're experiencing. What has not changed? Fellas, I interview all different players and I'm around them 24/7. They all want to be great, or at least they say they want to be great. They all want to play at the next level, whatever that next level is. Most want to win. Almost everyone wants to improve. And they all want to be coached, even the ones that are uncoachable. Okay? What has not changed is the player's needs. You have to instill your level of discipline, and you have to hold your players accountable to the level that you're comfortable with. And Frank Martin said it 100 times, and he's right. The kids, they've changed, but we've changed too. We've changed as adults. We allow things to happen. And when we don't discipline and hold our players accountable, okay, they're going to run the program. So you decide how much discipline and how much accountability you're going to have in your program. A player needs structure and he needs freedom. You got to find the balance. They want and crave the relationship. They also want role models. They may not say it to you, but they are looking at your assistant coaches and yourself as role models. So you have a great chance to lead by example. And they need good teachers of the game. And they need, coaches that are going to care about them as people first and players second. So the wants and the needs really hasn't changed too much. How you deliver your message is everything today. Some difference makers I'll hit up quickly. What you teach is what they'll learn, and that's good. What you emphasize will determine their habits. And Coach Majerus always said that. Whatever we emphasize will become their habits. But what you tolerate will determine your daily atmosphere and your culture of your program. So you have to decide as a coaching staff what you're willing to tolerate. Now, on the other side of the picture, I think this is big. I think you have to bring this concept to your players when you meet with them again. Players have to focus on improving themselves, not to prove themselves. We hear it so many times, I'm going to prove myself in showcases and or on the court somewhere, or as a team, we're going to prove that we're better. I don't follow that mindset, because you can prove yourself in a one-game situation anytime. But if you don't improve yourself, you're not going to continue to strive for excellence. Think about this. You win that big game Friday night, that big high school game Friday night. Are you going to improve yourself the next day, or you feel comfortable that you proved yourself on Friday night? Now Saturday you'll slip into complacency. That's why I tell every player I talk to, and I think you should coach your guys this way. You have to improve yourself. That's your responsibility. But you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. This is the biggest disease that we have in high school basketball, the comparison game. It filters on up, and it filters down to the middle school game. Don't let your kids play the comparison game. It's one game they can never win. It's a recipe for unhappiness, because somebody is always going to be better than them, and they're always going to be better than someone else. And the more time your players focus in on comparing, the less time they become the best version of themselves. That is happening on eye level, which means you can see it happening, and it's happening under the surface. They're looking at minutes, shots, scholarships. I mean, it's rampant on how guys are playing the comparison game. So you have to hammer home the point of being the best version of yourself. Talk about development. Talk about improvement. Talk about competitiveness. Talk about progress. Focus in on the process, and that eliminates the comparison game. And this one, I think, is so important because the kids are so consumed with the future. And don't get me wrong, goals are important. We all have them. We all want to get somewhere someday. We have plans, that we have to implement. We have vision of where we'd like to be someday. But I tell every kid today, and if I was coaching today, I'd say the same thing. Big time is where you are right now today, not where you want to be. And it's not where you want to go. Big time is where you are. It helps them focus in on the present, the workout, the practice, the tutoring session, the test, their freshman year. So many people looking down the road at the result or where they want to be, and they skip steps. They don't follow the process. And what happens? They become inconsistent. They never become the best version of themselves because they're thinking too much about the future. The really great one and dones, they go to college basketball and they don't think about leaving. They know they're going to leave, but they focus in on the process. They focus on improvement. They focus on their team and their teammates. The guys that go to college basketball and say, I'm out of here. They don't even unpack their bags, but they're on campus. Those are the ones that don't get drafted or they slip in the draft. So it's really important. And when I think about my coaching profession, if I didn't treat Suffolk University and Stoneham High School and BU as the volunteer, and I didn't treat those positions like they were big time, I wouldn't have developed as a coach. I wouldn't have improved, and I wouldn't have been worthy of hiring somewhere else. So it's really important to get that message across to today's player. I get to interview and hang out and be with guys that are friends of mine and other coaches and do a lot of interviews. And when I interviewed Jay Wright, talking about traits, you can look at the talent of your player, but you better understand what he brings to the table in terms of traits. And Jay talked about two traits that when I asked him what is really important to you, and he said competitiveness. He's got to know if a kid loves to play. Regardless of the score, he wants to see if a recruit is going to continue to compete all game long. And the other is respect. He's looking at kids on how they respect their coaches, their teachers, their parents, all people. And he wants to know if a player can get happy when his teammate does well and he doesn't, being a good teammate. But for Jay Wright, his team is all about competitiveness and all types of respect. They respect the process and they respect all the people and the things around the process. And I thought that was fascinating and I wanted to share it. And all head coaches and assistants have different traits that are non-negotiables, and those are Jay's. But when you turn to Hugs, all right, Coach Huggins, I remember when he was at Cincinnati and I was at Ohio State, and we never got that close. But his big thing, I got a chance to interview him when I did a West Virginia game. He had a team one season that just didn't have any enthusiasm, and it really got inside of Hugs. It really bothered him. And so whether it was his current team or guys that he was recruiting, enthusiasm was the number one thing he was looking for. The team that he had one year, he had no fun. There was no enthusiasm. Even at the beginning of the season, even in the big games, he said that he didn't have the enthusiasm that he wanted his team to have. And when you look at the second paragraph, he says, you know, if I have to coach enthusiasm, I'm not coaching basketball. And so when guys are enthusiastic, he can coach the game, and that makes it more enjoyable for everyone. I thought that was a great point by Coach Huggins, and all his guys now at West Virginia, his recruiting philosophy, enthusiasm and energy, number one trait that he looks for. And John Calipari, the Hall of Fame coach, Bob Huggins will be, and Jay Wright will be as well. For Cal, he recruits the high-profile one-and-done kids, so for him, character is really important. He knows that guys can go out on their own and hurt the chemistry of the team. So his big question mark with character is, how does this guy on my team make it easier for the rest of the guys? You know, how does one teammate make it easier for the rest of the team? How does he help other players get better? You know, and then into respect, of course, for him, it's really important. Being in Kentucky, it's like being at a rock concert, right? Rock and roll concert. The ability to be respectful to all people at all times is huge. When you think about the Kentucky program for a minute, when I read this, you don't really hear about any problems. I don't remember Cal having any off-the-court problems with his kids. They do a thorough job in finding high-character guys that are respectful, that fit their program. Quick checklist for coaches. When you're coaching your team, you know, we say a lot of things, right? We talk about dedication. We talk about working harder. We talk about sacrifice. We talk about focus. There's so many things we talk about on a daily basis. I broke them down into 5 points that I would focus in on with my team. I want to make sure that they love the game and how I can show them how I love the game, and hopefully that will rub off. It's that passion and enthusiasm, like Huggins says, that I think is the most important thing that your team can do. Yes, execution is important, skill is important, but the love of the game, if I can hammer that point home to my team, I want to do that and show them ways to love the game more and to appreciate the game. And I think we'll see so many players after this time in our history of not playing. Hopefully guys will love the game more than ever before. Respect the game and all the people around the game. Preparation. That was a Rick Majerus specialty. To prepare for everything that you're going to do, from academics to basketball. The preparation game is the game within the game. And the more you can teach your players to prepare for everything, the better off they'll be. There's going to be situations that are going to arise that you didn't have any preparation for, but I think it's important to know that if your guys are prepared, then they feel confident, even on the unexpected. Improvement. That's the word I would just hammer home to my guys. It's all about improvement. It's not about proving yourself. It's about improving yourself. And then developing a basketball IQ within your program. Now, why can't you be the smartest team in your conference? Why can't you be the smartest player on the court? I would do everything in my power to educate my players from a terminology standpoint, from a basketball IQ standpoint. And those 5 points to me kind of put everything into perspective of what a great team is all about. And so I would there's subcategories for each one, but those are the 5 that I would really hammer home.
Hey, Coach.
Yeah.
We have another coach that we need to jump to in a couple of minutes.
I'm getting off it. I'll be 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Hey, I want to do this. We got to reschedule because we got a lot more to talk about. So look at your calendar.
Okay.
Go.
All right. These people are outstanding in social media in different ways. Generation Z, positivity, team building. Take a snapshot of these people. They are fabulous in the game, leadership. They help me a lot, and I think they'll help you. All right, Tom, anything else?
No, let's do this. Let's look at your calendar. You text me and tell me when you want to reschedule to talk about all the stories of the coaches you've been with. All right?
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, man. Tell your lovely daughter if she ever needs any help, let me know. All right?
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, Coach. Great job.